Yes.
Okay. Um, Today we will talk about function imports. Could everybody please mute? If you have any questions, unmute and go ahead and ask your questions. Today we will see function imports and deep create or deep insert. So let's see what the function import is. Okay. So so far, I mean, we have created entities, we have created entity sets, we have created associations, we have created association sets and all, right. So when we create an entity and entity set, basically there are create, read, update, delete operations that you could do on that entity, or I mean you could get the entity set. But let's say if one of your requirement does not fit one of these operations, I mean let's say if you want to commit a work item or something, if you could not be able to commit through these create, read, update and delete operations, there is another kind of action that is called function import. Okay. So it is basically, let's say if your request is going to be fit in, I mean the framework provided methods, let's say if you create an entity called bank, an entity set called banks, let's say if you have a request uh, to get all the banks based on the state and country, then I mean in the get entity set, probably you will have some criteria to get, I mean the banks, basically the user associated with the banks or something. But let's say if you want something else which you cannot fit in these CRUD operations, then you should go for the function imports. It's just like another um, just like these operations create, read, update, delete, that is other kind of operation where you take advantage of, I mean when you could not fit your request into one of these standard create, read, update, delete, get operations. Okay. I'll show you what how to create the function imports and all. But do you have any questions in the in theory part of function imports?
No.
So what I will do is I will use the bank service that I have created so that I can create a new function import where I am going to pass the country code and the state. So if we look at our bank's OData service, the entity we created is bank and the entity set we have created is banks, right? So if you go to the runtime artifacts, there are I mean 5 methods which we implemented. There are 5 methods which we implemented: banks underscore create entity, banks underscore delete entity, banks underscore get entity, banks underscore get entity set. Okay. In the banks underscore get entity set, let's say we have I mean included the logic, whoever logs in. So we are going to give all the banks associated with that user ID. Probably that user might have bank accounts with that bank or something like that. So if we have a request like we want to display all the banks which belong to, okay, particular country and particular state. Okay, so if we go to the banks underscore get entity set, here we have implemented logic to just look at country code US and New York, right? So what we want is we want an action called get banks by country state. So if I wanted to get all the banks which belong to Germany and some state, then the banks underscore get entity set could not have the logic to give us all the banks which belong to Germany and some state, right? So I just took this as an example. Basically there might be several scenarios when you build your OData service. There might be several requests which could not hold in these five methods that you see here. Anything that you could not fit in these methods, you should go for the function import. Let's say if one of these method could be able to serve your request, then you should not create a function import for that purpose. Okay, understand, guys?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you go to data model, I just took this as an example, but in reality you could get this stuff even in get entity set if you pass country code and state code as filters. Okay, you could do that, but I just took this as an example to explain function imports. So in general or in practical purpose, whenever you could not serve the request through one of these standard CRUD methods, create, read, update, delete methods, then only you should go for the function import. Okay, so let me go to my so if you look at this data model, right click on this data model folder and say create, okay, and you say function import. Okay, I'll just say banks by country state. Okay, so this is my function import. What this function import does is when I pass the country code and state code, it is going to give me banks associated with that country and state. So if you look at the function import, this is the name of it, and here you will say what is the return type. The return type would be one of your entity type or complex type. I choose my entity type, and the return type would be the bank entity, and the cardinality is going to be 0 to n. So I'm going to return multiple banks. So in that case you got to give the corresponding entity set name. Okay, so I'm just going to say banks by country and state. Okay,
You don't have to give the method type.
Yeah, you have to
HTTP.
give. You have to give.
Okay.
So here, I mean, you got here in the HTTP method, you got to mention whether you are receiving data or you are posting data. In this case, I am receiving data from, I mean, the system. So I mention get. Okay. So I have created a function import called banks by country state. So the return type is entity and the return type of that entity is bank entity and the cardinality is 0 to n. So since it is returning more than one entity, you got to mention what is the entity set that you are returning. And this HTTP method will decide whether you are receiving data or whether you are posting data to the system through this function import. Since I am returning data, I have chose HTTP method get. Okay. So in other this function import give you data, you got to pass couple of parameters. One is the country code and the other one is the state code. Okay. So you go to the function import parameters here and you just go ahead and add it. So I'm going to add two parameters. One is country. Okay. And the EDM type is, so I choose string. So if you look at the data element, we have for the country code we have banks. So if you look at the entity type, so basically you can pass anything here, but since I'm expecting country code and state code, so I choose these function import parameters, but in general you can choose anything. Since I have one entity here, all the things revolve around this entity and this entity set and the corresponding properties. But let's say in a productive OData service, let's say if you have 10 entities or 10 entity sets, so you will see all the difference. Okay. So banks is the data element, and I'm going to just say country is the label. So, so the second parameter that I want to pass to the function import is state, right? And for the state, this one is PRO with a. So if you look at the entity types, you will see. One second, I will show you. So if you look at the entity type, you know what are the data elements for the corresponding. So this is the country, the corresponding is banks, and for corresponding state it is PRO visa. Okay. So I have created a function import, and the return type of that function import is a bank entity, and since there can be number of banks in that country and state, I chose return cardinality as 0 to n. Since it is 0 to n, it is an entity set called banks, and the HTTP method that I am using is get. Okay, and the function parameters is country and state. Okay, so since I have changed OData service during design time, I'm going to generate the runtime artifacts. You understand up to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll go to, since we have made changes, we need to see whether it reflects in the metadata or not. So remember guys, whenever you make changes, if you could not see those changes in the metadata, then those changes that you have made are not available to outside world. So every time you make change, just check the metadata so that you will come to know whether those changes really could be seen by the outside people. Okay. Okay. So this is my service. Okay. I'll go to the client, gateway client. So I will add the system query option format equal to metadata. So if we look at it, we'll see the entity type, bank, and all its properties. Okay, and there is a function import with name banks by country state. It is the return type is collection. Okay, and that collection is banks entity set, and the method, the HTTP method we are using is get, and the SAP label is banks by country and state. Uh, so even if you give some pseudo name kind of thing in this label, people can understand what it really means. Okay, one parameter is state and its type is string. Okay, and the label is state, and the second parameter is a country, and the type of the the second parameter is string. Okay, so I could be able to see it now. Let's say, so which method you want to implement in order to serve the function import. Okay, that is the main part. So if you go to runtime artifacts, so if we this is my data provider class extension. Okay, there will be a method called, okay, one second, execute action. This is the method that you want to implement. Okay, this is the method that you want to implement, execute underscore action. Okay, so this is my function import name. Okay, this is my parameters. This is my second parameter. Okay, and the return type is bank. This one is entity. I'm returning an entity type called bank, and the return cardinality is 0 to n, meaning banks entity set. Okay, and the HTTP method that I'm using for this function import is get. Okay, so what is the corresponding method in data provider class extension you got to implement? So this is the method that we got to implement or redefine. Okay, let's go ahead and redefine. So let me, I did not put any logic, but I just want to see what are all the import parameters, how do I receive my parameters, how do I know which function import is called. Okay, so for that purpose, instead of putting logic, I will just see what are all the input parameters and all. Okay, so I will add a breakpoint here. So how do you call it? So this is how you call it. Okay, so this is the function import name. So normally when we are requesting a bank, normally we give the entity set name followed by primary keys. Okay, here we are requesting banks by country and state. Okay, and I am going to give the question mark and say and pass my function import parameters. Country equal to, okay, single colons US, and okay, what is your second parameter? State equal to, okay, TX. Okay, so this is the URI. So basically you are going to mention the function import name and you are going to add the question mark and you are going to give all the function import names and its corresponding values separated by ampersand symbol. Okay, this is how you request it. So let me go ahead and call. Okay, so it come into the debug. So now I got to know what is the function import. Then only, let's say in your OData service, if you have 10 function imports, you got to write specific logic for each function import, right? Then you should know what is the function import. Okay, so if you see the import parameter action IV underscore action name, you could see the function import name. Okay, similarly in the IT parameter, you will see all the function import parameters. You will, it is the same name and value, key value pairs, state equal to Texas and country equal to US. Okay, and the return type is going to be ER data. You can return any type of data because for some of the function imports, probably you might give you one entity, and probably for another function import you might give bunch of entities or entity set. So it accepts any kind of data, so you got to properly format it and send it. Okay, now I know what is the information I look for. So with this function import name and with this function import parameters, I can write proper code to give the banks belong to this country and state. Okay, any questions guys before I implement? So I will read this one. So this is the line type. It has a name and value. Okay, data ls parameter type, this one, and data lv country type,
Banks.
banks. Okay, data LV static type.
Folks.
Okay, then now we got to, okay, if R, let's say case, so IV action name, okay, and case. So assume that you will have lot of function imports. So when banks by country state is the function import name, what I will do is read IT parameter, okay, read table IT parameter into ls parameter, okay, with key name equal to country, okay. So now LV underscore country equal to ls parameter hyphen value. Okay, similarly, I'm going to copy the same thing, change the values, state, okay. So, so if LV country is not initial and LV state is not initial, okay, data LT entity type, okay, 1 second, table of TS bank, LS entity type, so data LT bank, no, LS bank type BNKA, data LT bank type table of BNK. Since we have only used a subset of properties of the bank table, we got to do all this, we got to have all these intermediate structures in order to get the proper entities and entity sets. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select star from BNKA where banks equal to LV country, so into LT bank, okay, and PRO visa equal to LV state. Okay, so we loop through.
You'll have to do into table.
Okay, loop through this table LT bank into LS bank and loop. Okay, so you move this corresponding LS bank to LS entity. Okay, append LS entity to LT entity. Okay, now you have all the data in the LT entity, but the thing is you got to make it as any data. Okay, so what you should do is we have this method, right? Copy data to reference. So if we pass any day anything, it will give you data. So I'm going to use this. So after the loop, okay, I'm going to call this method exporting is data equal to LT entity, okay, importing CR data equal to ER entity. Okay, so let me check the syntax. ER data, sorry, changing. So it went through fine. So let me, so basically, since we have only one function import, we just mentioned one case, one condition to tackle. So basically, in a real scenario probably you will end up more. So you are just going to add all those scenarios, okay? Okay, let me let me add a breakpoint here. Sorry. So I will execute the same function import with function import parameters country and state. Okay, so let's see, I mean this is the action name, banks by country state. Okay, so let's get so we read the parameter table. So we got US and Texas as country and state. So we are going to read the bank table. So we have around 4 banks. So we okay, let's execute one more time. So LTT entity is, you have 4 banks with the information. Okay, let's see what the error is. So is it our error? So let me execute it. So yeah, I think I mean someplace it has created a date as null. So since created date is a date and time, the data that we are receiving has one 0 value. Let's go to BNKA. I think bank country is US and region is Texas. Let's execute it. I think at one place. So if you look at it, the date here, created date has an empty value. So since when we create the entity we did not mention that this value can be null, so it is giving us the problem. Okay, so just say nullable. So if you, when you look at the error log, you should you should know what the problem is. Okay, So what I have done is on the bank entity I have changed created at field can be nullable. Okay, so since I have changed the metadata, so let me go ahead. So you can see here invalid format, return table, row number 2, property value created at, and property value 0000 in date and time field. So let me refresh catalog. So let me refresh metadata. So I'll come to the gateway client. Okay, so we passed this through fine. So now we will get all the banks which exist in, Texas. So similarly, you can pass any information. Let's say Illinois. I don't know whether it exists or not, but let's look at it. So you have several banks in Illinois. So this is how function imports work. Basically, whenever you could not serve your request through the standard create, read, update, delete, and get methods, function imports is the way to go. Okay, so when you are working probably you might have lots of scenarios where function imports will come in handy when you could not accommodate all the needs to the through the standard methods. Any questions, guys?
No.
Okay, you could be able to understand it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not only here you could get the details, you could probably post some data to, let's say, workflows or like anything for your OData service. Let's say if something happens, you got to create a workflow item or something like that. You can do all of that through the function imports. Okay, so if you have no questions, I will move on to the next one, deep create or deep insert. So what deep insert is, let's say when we create the bank, it is the only entity that we are creating. It is just one entity that we are creating. But let's say, we looked at our, one second. So in the bank OData service, we have just created bank. We have seen how to create an entity called bank. But most of the in most of the practical scenarios, probably you need to create two entities at one go. Let's say if you have both sales orders and let's say if you look at this track sales order, So if you look at the sales order app, on the left hand side you will have all the sales orders, and on the right hand side you will have all the sales order items. Okay, and the sales order items, so you will see all the sales order items, and each sales order item include a product. And here the product is a master data, so you never create products, but you are going to create sales orders and sales order items. So sales order is not, just an independent entity. It will have, whenever you are creating a sales order, probably you should create sales order item too. And in the sales order item, you will include the product ID. And this product ID is maintained as master data in your database, because the products is, um, you are just going to choose a product. You are not going to create a product. When you are creating a sales order, you just choose a product, in the sales order item, right? You are not going to create a product. So here we are going to create, so whenever we are creating a sales order, so we are as well creating sales order items too. And this sales order item will have product ID into it, so that when we display it back with the product ID, we can display the product details. Okay, you can similarly you can go any level deep. Okay, so but let's say if you look at the standard methods, so we are done with our bank app, so let's just put it back into display mode. Okay, so I will go to my enterprise procurement model, where I have sales order item and product. Okay, so if you go to the runtime artifacts, so when we go to the runtime artifact, we see methods for sales orders, sales orders create entity, in which you will only can receive sales order. Okay, let's say if you redefine it, so in the in the data provider, you will get only sales order information. You are not going to, in this data provider, you are not going to provide enough room for passing the sales order items, because this means, we are just going to create a sales order. Then how can you, how can you do, sales order and sales order item at one go? Okay, so that's where, the concept of deep creates or deep inserts will come into place. Okay, so we'll see how to do it. Okay, any questions, guys, so far?
No.
Okay, so we said, when we generated the runtime artifacts, basically it generates two category of classes, one for model provider class and one for the data provider class. So the model provider class, is exact replica of what we have done during the design time. All the, if we go to the model provider class, here you will see define method. In the define method, uh, if you look at the sales order, okay, so it create the sales order entity with all these properties, and it binds a structure, okay, it binds a structure called BAPI underscore EPM underscore SO header. So if you look at it, it gives you all the properties on the sales order. So it will, it will have all the properties. So what it's saying is whenever you are creating sales order, this is the structure which provides you data. This is how, whenever you create the sales order, this is how it looks like, right? But what we are expecting is, when we are creating the sales order, this is not the structure that we wanted to associate with. We want to have all these properties which is mentioned in this structure. Apart from that, we want to pass table data containing item information. Okay. So when we talk about model provider class, right, it will be a replica of what we have defined during the design time. But there is one more class called model provider class extension. Let's say if we wanted to override the design time behavior or the design time behavior during runtime, this is where we are going to make changes. What I wanted to do here is I'm going to create a type with sales order. Okay, so this is the entity that I wanted to create. I name my type as ts underscore deep entity. Okay, so basically it is a type which will have so if you look at the model provider class extension, what I will be doing is I have added a new type called ts underscore deep entity which will have all the sales order properties, and I have just created a type called ts underscore deep entity with all the sales order properties. So you are just going to take all of it and you are just going to create, include in the type called ts underscore deep entity. Apart from that, you are just going to add the navigation property on the sales order which will go to the sales order items, order to items, type standard table of this sales order item. Okay, this sales order item. So if you look at the TS sales order item, so this is the you will have BAPI underscore EPM underscore SO item. So I will create TS underscore deep entity in model provider class extension. Okay. So what this deep entity will have, okay, end of TS deep entity, and in here I'm going to include all sales order properties, and I'm going to define a property with navigation property which will take to sales order items. Okay, order to items. Okay, so which is of type table of sales order item. Okay, so do you follow, guys? I have created a type called ts underscore deep entity which will have all the sales order properties, and I do have a one more property called order to items. You got to give equivalent name to navigation property which is of type standard table sales order item entity. Okay, so basically this type includes all the sales order properties and can accommodate multiple sales order items. Do you understand, guys? So
Yes.
yeah, the next thing that I would do is, here in the model provider class extension, so we have a define method which I am going to redefine. Okay, what I will do is, in the define, in the redefinition of this define method from the model provider class extension, I am going to call super define, because I don't want to change all the entities. Okay, so if you look at it, so if you look at the model provider class, there is a define method in which he is going to define sales order item, product, associations and all. Let's say if you don't do it, it is not going to do all this stuff. So in the model provider class extension, first call the super class define method, then make whatever the changes that you wanted to make. What I want to do here is, I'll just take this one. I'll just say I am going to use this one. So here it is creating the entity type. What I'm going to do is, in my define method, in the model provider class extension, so for all these extension classes, so if you go to the attribute, there is a model attribute which will give you, your model. You will access all your, this is the this is your complete OData model. Okay, so I will get my entity type. Okay, I'm going to pass entity name and entity type. Okay, so what I will do is, so I will get model. Okay, get entity type. If I look at the model, so let's look at the method. um, get entity type is my method. The parameter that I'm passing is entity name, IV entity name, and I'm going to return the entity type. Okay, so model entity name equal to sales order. Okay, I'm going to read my entity type. So once I get this entity type, I'm going to bind a different structure. So I'm going to use this one. So instead of this structure, I'm going to say this model provider class extension and I'm going to mention the type ds underscore deep entity. Can you put it in mute, guys?
Oh,
Okay. So LO entity type is not defined. Okay, if LO entity type is bound, then only and if. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do.
you have to give data.
Sorry. So entity type is not defined.
Maybe you need to define that before you make the call to the super define.
No, no, this is, you that should be your first method
Mm.
because this super, one second, I just copied this data. Referenced. Because you want to, you don't want to, not define all the stuff that you are not touching. So the first call should be to the superclass define method. Then whatever the changes that you want to make, you put it after, because you are not going to touch all the things that you don't want to make any changes, right? I mean, it looks... Oh, okay, 1 second. Don't know what it is.
And there is no if statement also is missing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So basically, I mean, let's say if we give some entity type which is not there, then this LO entity type is not bound, right? That's why, I mean, you got to include this statement saying that if it holds value, then only you are going to change its structure. Sorry, guys. So what we have done so far is, I mean, we have created a new type with the structure that we wanted. Okay. So in the model provider class extension, and in the model provider class extension define method, first statement you are going to call the superclass define method, and you are going to access your sales order entity, and you are going to change the associated structure with that sales order entity. Okay. So in the model provider class, we have redefined the define method. Okay. You could understand up to this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now in the data provider class extension, right? So this is what we have done. So this is first step. The second step is redefine define method in model provider class extension. Okay, the first statement is going to be call your superclass define method. Okay, so that means model provider class define method. I mean, the problem is, let's say, why I am insisting that point is, let's say if I put this super define method, so if I put it here, does it work?
No, the sales order entity will not be created then.
Yeah, so I mean, that is the purpose. I mean, put this super define at the start of the code so that you don't miss anything. Okay, so
Right.
once you have done that, then make the changes to the design time behavior as per your requirement. Okay, meaning we have read the sales order entity and we have changed its structure to the custom structure that we have created. Okay. So similarly, in the data provider class extension also, we have corresponding methods for sales order create entity and sales order item create entity. But the thing is, it will have, one second. So in the data provider class extension, so if you go to this sales order create entity, you can only send sales orders data to the sales orders create entity. Similarly, if you want to create sales order item, you can only create one at a time, and it will give you, it will only allow sales order item data. But here we are passing in a structure with the sales order properties and its corresponding items properties. So there is a method called, okay, there is a method called create deep entity. Okay. So you got to implement so I'm going to redefine this method, and if you look at it, here you can get the entity name and even the data provider. In the data provider, so you will read this data. Okay, so basically, let me I'm not going to do anything. I did not do anything, but let me keep a breakpoint. Okay. So did any of you guys implemented the expand functionality in your model? Now what we need to do is, whenever we are creating, we got to pass sales order information and sales order items information. Let's say there is some problem with my service, so I'm using another service. So I'm going to say expand order to items. So here I have order to items. So I'm going to request in the JSON format. So okay, so this is the format that I want to pass my data. So I go to my service. I'm going to create the entity. I'm going to create the sales order entity. Okay, and I'm going to copy this data. Use as request. So I'm going to get rid of this metadata, and I'm going to say sales order 100. Okay, and I have a navigation property called order to items. This is the property that I have created as part of the ts underscore deep entity. Okay, so in it I'm going to pass multiple sales order items. Okay, so let me take out this metadata and let me pass only sales order items. So this is an array of 3 sales order items. So let me get rid of this metadata. So let me put it on red. So even this item to product, I'm going to take it out. Let's see. Let me put it out there. Let me keep it. So I'll take it out later. So I'm going to change the sales order ID details. Okay. So basically this is the information that I'm passing. This is the total payload. This represents the outer curly braces represent it is a JSON object. Inner it says D means it is total payload, and inside I passed all these sales order properties and another property called order to items, which is of standard which is of type standard table with sales order items. So let me execute it. Let me see whether it will stop in the create deep entity. Okay. So I'm going to post sales order information with the let me add okay, content type is application JSON. So let me just post it. So it is giving me some XML error. I think there is some problem. Can you able to, do you guys follow up to this point?
Yeah.
So what we have done is, okay, 1 second. So I prepared the payload in a way that it will have all the sales order properties and the other two items property with the array of sales order items. Okay, let me execute it once more. So what is the error? So error while parsing an XML stream. That's it. Quantity type. So let me get rid of a couple of items just for the sake of just to narrow down the problem. I think it is the same error. Okay guys, since it is getting late anyhow, I will look into it. Probably we will discuss, we will test this scenario tomorrow. But do you understand up to this point what we have done in order to create a deep insert?
Yeah.
I will see why the problem, why there is problem, but so basically we are going to, we have created a data type with the, with the information structure we want. And in the second step, we have redefined the model provider class extension to change the design time behavior, because in the redefine of the define method, we are going to get the entity we want and we are going to bind the structure, we are going to alter the structure from the design time behavior. Then in the third step, we are going to implement create underscore deep entity for our entity, so that we can get all the, so we can create sales order items while we are creating sales orders too. Then we are going to test it. Since it errored with a problem, I will check why it is erroring out. Okay, but this is about deep entity or deep insert. We will see tomorrow how to test it. But any questions?
Basically, what is the use of these association sets? I mean, do we ever use it?
No, not really. I haven't used it. Probably there might be a need, but I don't see any need.
Okay. The other thing was the function imports that we just created.
Uh-huh.
I mean, for that to, once we created that and we regenerated the runtime artifacts,
Uh-huh.
that does not reflect anywhere in the model provider class, is it? Because you went and checked in the metadata.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it did,
It
right?
Yeah, it showed in the metadata, but what I'm asking is it does not show anywhere in the model provider class, is it?
We haven't, I mean, looked at it, right? Okay, let's go ahead and look at it. 1 second.
No, that
So
was the first time you went to the metadata to check the changes that you made. So that is why I was just,
no, even in the model provider class, probably I might have missed. Even in the model provider class, it should reflect. Uh, so in the define, right?
right.
So in the define actions, if you see here, right?
Hmm.
In the define method, since we have only one entity define bank, I mean, it was already there. It had a second method called define actions.
Oh,
In
I
the
see.
define actions, I mean, there is an action created with name of our function import name. It
Okay.
created, I mean, what is the return type, what is the cardinality of the return type, what is the HTTP method we use, so what is the function import parameter and what is its type and all. So you can certainly see it in model provider class.
Oh, okay. So basically data, the metadata is basically just a reflection of the model provider class, right?
Yeah, I mean, it all drives from I mean, your OData service. OData service mean based on the OData service, I mean, you created the runtime artifacts will be generated,
Right, right.
and even the metadata reflects the same. What kind of entities you have, what are their properties, what kind of associations you have, what kind of association sets you have, what kind of actions you have. I mean, basically the metadata would give an user what this service is all about. I mean, without you explaining to them how to use it, by looking at the metadata, they should be able to understand, like, okay, I mean, these are all the entities, these are all the relationship between these entities. This is how I use it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, any more questions, guys?
No.
I think we have almost reached up to, I mean, the end of OData. We have one more thing, um, links. I mean, basically we have to deal with if there is a PDF or photos or something like that. So we got to deal with that. That is the only thing pending. But for that, I got to, I mean, check whether there is any Adobe document services installed and all. So that is the only thing pending from